get into the end of the book. Oh my goodness, we're almost finished. And actually, the last chapter in The Giver is not long at all. And if you remember, when we left off last week, Jonas and Gabriel have seemed to make it pretty far away from their utopia. And so in a way, it's beautiful and it's wonderful. They're seeing nature, they're seeing animals, life is great. But then on the other side, the other hand, things are very difficult because one, Jonas is injured, and two, Jonas and Gabriel are constantly hungry. They're having a hard time finding food. And so, and even at one point, Jonas even questions whether or not he should have left, but then he has to remind himself, oh my goodness, if I hadn't have left and taken Gabriel, they would have released him. We know what release is. So here we see Jonas and Gabriel continuing on their journey. So let's get into it. Chapter 23. Jonas felt more and more certain that the destination lay ahead of him. Very near now in the night that was approaching, none of his senses confirmed it. He saw nothing ahead but the endless ribbon of road unfolding and twisting narrow curves. He heard no sound ahead, yet he felt it. Felt that elsewhere was not far away, but he had little hope left that he would be able to reach it. His hope diminished further when the sharp, cold air began to blur and thicken with swirling white. Gabriel, wrapped in his inadequate blanket, was hunched, shivering and silent in his little seat. Jonas stopped the bike wearily, lifted the child down, and realized with heartbreak how cold and weak Gabe had become. Standing in the freezing mound that was thickening around his numb feet, Jonas opened his own tunic, held Gabriel to his bare chest, and tied the torn and dirty blanket around them both. Gabriel moved feebly against him and whimpered briefly into the silence that surrounded them. Dimly, from a nearly forgotten perception, as blurred as the substance itself, Jonas recalled what the whiteness was. "It's called snow, Gabe," Jonas whispered. "Snowflakes. They fall down from the sky. They're very beautiful." Okay, so if you remember right now at this point in the novel or in this point in the year, it's wintertime. He's left the confines of the utopia where the climate is perfect and fantastic and awesome. And so just like they experienced rain and hills in the previous chapter, here they're experiencing something that happens in the wintertime. They're experiencing snow. And it seems to come at the worst possible time. They're already hungry, they're already cold, they're already weary, and now it's snowing. And I love how Jonas is taking care of poor little Gabriel. Gabriel's up against his body with this little torn baby blanket, and they're trying to make it. There was no response from the child who once had been so curious and alert. Jonas looked down through the dusk at the little head against his chest. Gabriel's curly hair was matted and filthy, and there were tear stains outlined in dirt on his pale cheeks. His eyes were closed. As Jonas watched, a snowflake drifted down and was caught briefly for a moment's sparkle in the tiny, fluttering eyelashes. Wearily, he remounted the bicycle. A steep hill loomed ahead. In the best of conditions, the hill would have been a difficult, demanding ride. But now, the rapidly deepening snow obscured the narrow road and made the ride impossible. His front wheel moved forward imperceptibly as he pushed on the pedals with his numb, exhausted legs. But the bicycle stopped. It would not move. He got off and let it drop sideways into the snow. And for a moment, he thought how easy it would be to drop beside it himself, to let himself and Gabriel slide into the softness of the snow, the darkness of night, the warm comfort of sleep. But he had come this far, he must try to go on. So now that the snow is thickening, they've reached a hill, and Jonas has realized he cannot ride his bike up the hill. One, the hill is very steep, and then two, with the snow, the tires can't really grip the ground, and so now he's got to walk. So if you can imagine, he's completely exhausted, he's hungry, he's malnourished, he's cold. He and Gabriel are going to try to make it up this hill. And for a split second, Jonas actually thinks about just giving up, just falling into the snow and just giving up on everything. But he had come this far. He had to at least try to go on. The memories had fallen behind him now, escaping from his protection to return to the people of his community. Were there any left at all? Could he hold on to a last bit of warmth? Did he still have the strength to give? Could Gabriel still receive? He pressed his hands into Gabriel's back and tried to remember sunshine. For a moment, it seemed that nothing came to him, that his power was completely gone. Then it flickered suddenly, and he felt tiny tongues of heat begin to creep across and into his frozen feet and legs. He felt his face begin to glow and the tense cold skin of his arms and hands relax. For a fleeting second, he felt that he wanted to keep it for himself, to let himself bathe in sunlight, unburdened by anything or anyone else. But the moment passed and was followed by an urge, a need, a passionate yearning to share the warmth with the one person left for him to love. Aching from the effort, he forced the memory of warmth into the thin, shivering body in his arms. Gabriel stirred. For a moment, they both were bathed in warmth and renewed strength as they stood hugging each other in the blinding snow. And so here we have another beautiful encounter. Remember, Jonas's goal, his ultimate goal of leaving the community, is so that all of the memories inside of him would go back to everybody in the community. Everyone in the utopia would understand how the world works. And so that way, the people in the society would stop releasing people, oh my goodness, but also they would just have a more clear, a more beautiful, or more whole view of life. And instead of one person in the community being burdened with everything, the burden would be shared by everyone equally. And so as he's gotten farther and farther away, he's lost a lot of those memories, just like he and the giver had planned. But here, he uses his last little bit of strength to bring a memory of sunshine and warmth to him and Gabriel because they're cold. And I absolutely love how at first he just wants to keep it for himself, but then he feels a need to take care of Gabriel. He loves Gabriel. He wants him to survive. He really left the community to save Gabriel. And so here he shares that warmth with Gabriel in the cold. Jonas began to walk up the hill. The memory was agonizingly brief. He had trudged no more than a few yards through the night when it was gone, and they were cold again. But his mind was alert now. Warming himself ever so briefly had shaken away the lethargy and resignation and restored his will to survive. He began to walk faster on feet that he could no longer feel. But the hill was treacherously steep. He was impeded by the snow and his own lack of strength. He didn't make it very far before he stumbled and fell forward. On his knees, unable to rise, Jonas tried a second time. His consciousness grasped at a wisp of another warm memory and tried desperately to hold it there, to enlarge it and pass it into Gabriel. His spirits and strength lifted with the memory, momentary warmth, and he stood. Again, Gabriel stirred against him as he began to climb. So as he's going up the hill, it's nighttime, it's cold, it's snowing, and he gets a little bit of like some pep in his step from that little short memory of sunshine, but he trips and he falls. And so then he finds one more memory. He warms himself in Gabriel, he picks himself up, and he's going to keep going. He's not giving up. But the memory faded, leaving him colder than before. If only he had had time to receive more warmth from the giver before he escaped. Maybe there would be more left for him now. But there was no purpose in if-onlys. His entire concentration now had to be on moving his feet, warming Gabriel and himself, and going forward. He climbed, stopped, and warmed them both briefly again, with a tiny scrap of memory that seemed certainly to be all that he had left. The top of the hill seemed so far away, and he did not know what lay beyond. But there was nothing left to do but to continue. He trudged upward. As he approached the summit of the hill at last, something began to happen. He was not warmer. If anything, he felt more numb and more cold. He was not less exhausted. On the contrary, his steps were leaden, and he could barely move his freezing, tired legs. But he began suddenly to feel happy. He began to recall happy times. He remembered his parents, his sister. He remembered his friends, Asher and Fiona. He remembered the giver. Memories of joy flooded through him suddenly. He reached the place where the hill crested, and he could feel the ground under his snow-covered feet become level. It would not be uphill anymore. "We're almost there, Gabriel," he whispered, feeling quite certain without knowing why. "I remember this place, Gabe." And it was true. But it was not a grasping of a thin and burdensome recollection. This was different. This was something that he could keep. It was a memory of his own. He hugged Gabriel and rubbed him briskly, warming him to keep him alive. The wind was bitterly cold. The snow swirled, blurring his vision. But somewhere ahead through the blinding storm, he knew there was warmth and light. Using his final strength and a special knowledge that was deep inside him, Jonas found the sled that was waiting for him at the top of the hill. Numbly, his hands fumbled for the rope. He settled himself on the sled and hugged Gabe close. The hill was steep, but the snow was powdery and soft, and he knew that this time there would be no ice, no fall, no pain. Inside his freezing body, his heart surged with hope. They started down. Jonas felt himself losing consciousness, and with his whole being willed himself to stay upright atop the sled, clutching Gabriel, keeping him safe. The runner sliced through the snow, and the wind whipped at his face as they sped in a straight line through an incision that seemed to lead to the final destination. The place that he had always felt was waiting, the elsewhere that held their future and their past. He forced his eyes open as they went downward, sliding, and all at once, he could see lights, and he recognized them now. He knew they were shining through the windows of rooms, that they were red, blue, and yellow lights that twinkled from trees in places where families created and kept memories, where they celebrated love. Downward, faster and faster. Suddenly, he was aware with certainty and joy that below, ahead, they were waiting for him. And that they were waiting too, for the baby. For the first time, he heard something that he knew to be music. He heard people singing. Behind him, across the vast distances of space and time, from the place he had left, he thought he heard music too. But perhaps it was only an echo. Okay. Ooh, I made it through that ending without crying. Yay, go Miss Woodruff. Okay, so Gabriel and Jonas make it to this hill. They climb the hill, and it's awful. And when they get to the top of the hill, an interesting and strange thing happens. Jonas remembers the hill. He knows what's going to happen. And when you know it, at the top of the hill, there's a sled. Now, the very, very first memory that Jonas ever received in The Giver, if you remember, is a memory of him riding a sled. Now, somehow, though, this memory isn't one of the memories that's disappeared back to the community now that he's left. He says it's a memory that's all his own. He knows this place personally. He and Gabriel get on the sled, and as they slide down, Jonas sees lights and hears music, and we get the impression that the elsewhere that they're traveling to is celebrating Christmas. Now, the ending of this novel has caused all kinds of controversy. There are literary greats who argue about it even to this day, and Lois Lowry, the author of this book, has been interviewed and asked about this ending repeatedly, and she has repeatedly refused to give a definitive answer. I think in a way she does with her later books, but for a long time people didn't understand what happened. They didn't know if Jonas and Gabriel actually made it to elsewhere and everything was great, or what a lot of literary critics believe is that Jonas and Gabriel basically become delusional. As they're climbing up this hill, there is no sled, there is no music, there is no elsewhere. They both basically die. They experience the cold and the malnourishment and this and the other, but they experience this beautiful, peaceful death together. And that actually was the pervading interpretation of the ending of this book for a really long time. Also, Lois Lowry does give us a hint to this. If you look earlier in the book, I'm going to read from page 88. This is the day right after Jonas has received his memory, and they asked him at the breakfast or at morning meal about did he dream. And Jonas says, no, I didn't dream. But in his mind, he says, again and again as he slept, he had slid down the snow-covered hill. Always in the dream, it seemed as if there were a destination, a something he could not grasp what, that lay beyond the place where the thickness of snow brought the sled to a stop. He was left upon awakening with the feeling that he wanted, even somehow needed to reach the something that waited in the distance. The feeling that it was good, that it was welcoming, that it was significant. But he did not know how to get there. So earlier in the novel, Jonas re-experiences that sled ride, and there is some foreshadowing that at the end of that sled ride, there's something good. Now, like I said, for a long time, people believed that Jonas and Gabriel unfortunately passed away, and they just had good, happy thoughts before they passed away. However, Lois Lowry has written 3 sequel books to The Giver. There's Messenger, Gathering Blue, and there's Sun. And Sun, actually, she only wrote that maybe 10 years ago or so. And that's very odd because Sun and The Giver are so far apart from each other. But in my opinion, the book Sun, S-O-N, matches The Giver the most closely. And so for a long time, people believed Jonas and Gabriel died. Jonas and Gabriel died. However, when these sequel books came out, you see Jonas and you see Gabriel, and they're not dead. They're not in the utopia. They're existing in a totally different realm. They're in elsewhere. So we get a happy ending. We get a little bit of joy in there knowing that Gabriel and Jonas actually do make it, because we see them in those other novels. And I won't give everything away, but I will do a little commercial break for Sun by Lois Lowry. I think that's the one that's the most similar to The Giver. So if you like The Giver and you kind of want to see what happens next, I say go read Sun. And in the novel Sun, you actually follow Gabriel's birth mother. So the young girl who was selected to have Gabriel, you get to see her journey, and you get to see what happens after Jonas and Gabriel leaves. And actually the reason why the novel is called Sun, S-O-N, is because Gabriel's birth mother goes on this beautiful epic journey to get to him. She wants to find her baby. And it is such a good book. And right now, since you're at home, hanging out with family, maybe have some free time, I say read it. You will not be disappointed. It is a little bit longer than The Giver, but it's really, really good. And so I will end it there. Now, when you do your writing assignment, though, I want you to use your imagination and think, what do you think specifically happened when Jonas and Gabriel made it to elsewhere? What happened? What did they say to them? What did they see? What did they experience? How in the world did Jonas know about the sled, even though that was a memory he got from The Giver? Tell me and be descriptive. Use those details. Show me, don't tell me.